Missouri, Mrs. Wagner, who for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Huizenga. Director Grewal. Director Grewal? The SEC is expected to finalize its proposal on mandatory climate disclosures in the coming months. Issuers will be required to disclose very detailed and scientific climate-related data, possibly including data on downstream Scope 3 emissions, such as production and transportation of goods, employee commuting, and a host of other indirect emissions. Operationally, sir, how do you plan on handling enforcement cases involving an issuer's disclosure of its Scope 3 emissions?
Thank you for the question. Again, the rulemaking process is being run out of different
I'm talking about the enforcement.
Yeah, I'll speak from an enforcement perspective. We'll take the same approach we've taken to date. We know that ESG and climate issues are important to investors. We know that issuers are making statements about their climate risk already, and we know that investment advisors are marketing ESG funds. So we brought greenwashing cases when they breach their fiduciary duty on the advisor side, and we brought cases against issuers, most recently a litigated case against Brazilian issuer Vale for lying about its ESG policies. And so it's the same thing. If we find that sort of deceit in their statements, we'll bring cases.
But how will the SEC verify whether the issuer has misstated its Scope 3 emissions?
So again, I can't speak to the climate
From an
rulemaking,
enforcement standpoint.
but I'll give you how we're doing it in our enforcement actions. We're relying on experts in our litigated matters.
Really? Is the SEC an expert in climate policy?
We've retained experts in our case to help us litigate that matter, yes.
What statute provides the SEC with the direct authority to regulate climate change?
In the litigated matter, there are anti-fraud violations of the federal violations of the anti-fraud provisions of the federal securities laws. That's a theory in the litigated case.
And you say the SEC has experts on staff to address climate change?
Again, I can't speak to the rest of the SEC.
But you just did. I'm just asking. Do they have?
I'm just talking about my enforcement division, and the people we've retained in that particular case are experts.
You have experts.
We've retained them in the litigation, yes.
How will the SEC recruit and hire qualified staff who are both experts on climate change in your purview and securities law disclosures?
So our attorneys and investigators are the experts on the securities laws, and we consult with experts in our investigations and in our litigation regardless of the subject. So in the particular example I'm sharing with you, we rely on experts on the types of issues that are.
Perhaps we need to bring those, quote, experts on climate change in the SEC before this committee. Director Grewal, when it comes to enforcing the SEC's ESG disclosure rule, how do you envision determining whether a fund has incorporated ESG factors into its investment selection process when the SEC has not defined and likely cannot define just what those factors are?
Again, I don't want to speak to the rulemaking. I'd refer you to.
I'm not speaking to the rulemaking. I'm saying there is no definition. How do you do enforcement?
So the tools we have, you're talking about advisors. We brought a case recently against BNY Mellon for misstating their ESG practices. They said they were conducting a ESG review before making certain investments, and it turns out they weren't abiding by the processes that they had laid out in their disclosures.
Sir, just how are these funds expected to know what the letters ESG even mean without a clear definition in the proposed rule? And how will the enforcement division know what the letters E, S, and G mean without a clear definition?
Again, in the advisor space, in that particular case, we alleged a violation of the anti-fraud provisions of the Advisors Act. We alleged a breach of the advisor's fiduciary duties because they misstated to the investing public what they were doing when it came to how they were reviewing.
Has the SEC put out a definition of ESG?
Again, I think that's what the rulemaking process is.
But you can't enforce something that's not defined, sir.
You can enforce, Representative Wagner, lies. When an advisor lies about what it's doing,
lies when they don't even know what the clear definition in the proposed rule is. You know, we really need some answers on this, Mr. Chairman. I hope that we could bring in some of these so-called SEC experts. You know, I'm highly disappointed in the lack of answers and transparency today. I yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you. We now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, who is also the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, for 5